Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. India draw level at Vizag, winning by 106 runs after England fell short on day 4 despite several batters getting starts. In the end, that double 100 from Jasprit Jaiswal and Jasprit Bumrah's stunning blitz in England's first innings tipped the game too far in the host's favour. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Ben Gardner and Phil Walker. Mark Butcher will be joining us later on. Phil, how much of a missed opportunity was this for England? Not only in terms of India having several key players missing, but also in terms of how they kept India relatively quiet with the bat on a pretty good surface. And so many England batters got starts. Reading that scorecard in the 4th innings, 73, 28, 23, 23, 16, 26, 11, 36, 36. 7 of the top 9 got to 20. Only one of them got past 37.
I don't think they do regret. I don't think they do cranky. I don't think they do too much shoegazing, but we can. And no doubt about it, if 10 of the 11 Indian batters on day 1 and the first half of day 2 can't get past 40, and you end up giving up 140-run lead at the end of first innings, then that's the game. That's the game right there. England have played a lot of good cricket in this game. England could quite easily have been 2-0 up, and England, we can argue that they possibly should have been 2-0 up, really. Nonetheless, day 4 belonged to India, and it was always going to. You know, the chances, you were looking at a 20-1 shot. It possibly even less than that going into today. So the game wasn't really about today. There was intrigue, of course there was, and it's always watchable. But the game was about the first 2 days, really, I think. And England lost this game in their first innings. It was clear that the game, for all that England play this peculiar new brand of cricket or whatever, nonetheless, the game was conventional patterns. India win toss, India get 400 odd as a bare minimum. They got 396. England did quite well. You have to get parity, and you have to really look to get a little bit of a lead. I know that England play cricket in the 3rd and 4th innings, and that's marvellous, and it keeps us on the edge of our seats all the way through. But nonetheless, they needed to get up there. They needed to get around 400 minimum, really, on their first innings, and they were bundled out for 250 due to Bumrah. So that's that, really. India's stars have come through for them in a game that was absolutely must win. And that's what really came through watching it this morning, just how on tenterhooks they were, and how it was like Rohit Sharma was playing his first ever game for India. You saw he was more sort of ramped up than I've ever seen him before. And that shows you just how much India know that they're in a fight here. And they haven't really been confronted with an attitude like this in a long, long time, if ever, really. So 2 brilliant games of cricket. 1-1 is a fair result for the series going into the 3rd. Bring it on.
Ben, would you agree with that reading of today, at least? I thought, especially when Hartley and Folkes were batting towards the end, actually, the pitch still was playing pretty well. The odd ball kept low, but those two managed to put on a pretty steady stand together. And if you look at how England lost some of their wickets, you can see how Stokes and Root both fell cheaply, both fell in quite cheap ways. You could see how a team could have scored 100 more runs than England did on a pitch playing like it was today.
Yeah, I guess the thing that's tricky with sort of assessing this game is that I'd give them a slightly better chance than Phil said in 1 in 20, 15, 20% chance at best this morning. But if you're looking for the errors that England actually made, those errors kind of came today. This was the day when you can look at batters' innings and be like, might not have gone about it the right way. I guess we'll talk about Joe a bit more later. Whereas in the first, but Phil's right that the game was won in the first 3 days. But in those, it's actually hard to feel like England did loads wrong in a way. I mean, I think we were all sort of saying that actually, if a team wins the toss and bats first in that sort of pitch, and a guy makes a double 100, like brilliant double 100, you're doing pretty well to keep them to under 400. And then Bumrah bowls, one of the great spells because he's one of the great bowlers. And okay, there might be a couple of dismissals in that innings. Crawley's perhaps after he's, sort of inside of 100, but is trying to get on top of the spinner early and plays a bit of a hack. And then the 3rd innings again, we're sort of saying that England have kind of done that thing where they claw a game sort of back when they don't have any right to. So actually, you're looking for errors in the first 3 innings from England. It's tricky to pinpoint exactly what those are, and yet India just had enough that they had extended the lead too far for England. That there were a few more errors in the 4th innings, but that was always going to be too tough to chase anyway. So it's tricky. It's sort of missed opportunity for England in some ways, and also more in terms of just the personnel that India have out. Because I mean, we don't know who's going to be back at certain points. There's reports that Shami and Jadeja might be out for the series, but it's not official yet. And Rahul looks likely to come back for the next test, and Kohli at some point maybe as well. It feels like India are the team that might strengthen more than England as the series goes on, and it's 1-1. So from that point of view, that's a bit of a worry for England, I think.
Phil, just a word on Zak Crawley. 2 scores of 70 plus across the test match. I thought today he was absolutely brilliant, because the way he played Bumrah, he was leaving like a conventional old school opening batter. Bumrah, who in pretty much every other spell in the match looked utterly lethal, especially when the ball was reverse swinging. And he was very good against Bumrah. And then when Ashwin went too full, he was very comfortable attacking. I thought he looks like a batter who is really aware of his strengths and weaknesses in a way that I don't think he perhaps was not that long ago. And so much of batting is actually just knowing what you're good at.
Yeah, it looks to me as well like he trusts his defence, and that clearly wasn't the case when they were out there last time, and hasn't been the case against the swinging ball in England until the last 12, 18 months, perhaps. His dismissal in the first, look, I agree, masterful at times against an all-time world attack, or certainly 2 of them. Completely in control. The point at which he connects against the spinners is very key as well, because he can get out there and he can turn good length balls into half volleys. He played a beautiful shot just before he got out this morning against Ashwin, when Ashwin was bowling round the wicket and it was gripping, and he danced down, and he's quite light on his feet, and he just punched him past mid-off, and it was a shot of complete control, utter control. It was always, there is that sense with Crawley that the greatness is the prelude to the dismissal. And he also seems like he has this thing about getting in the 70s. I don't know if this is statistically borne out or not, but it seems like he gets lots and lots of 70s. He got a 70 in Australia. He's obviously got 2 here. He certainly got one at the Oval as well a couple of years back. Anyway, if you look at the Crawley's test match, it simultaneously reminds you of why he is so dangerous, why he could become a very, very, very good player, not just a player of moments, but a player who is more consistent than McCullum could have ever hoped for. Famously, he said he's not in the side to be consistent. Well, he's becoming so, but he's got to be greedy. That first innings, that was the moment, because England were 110 for 1, 120 for 1, maybe. It might have been for 2, but he was playing stunningly well. You know, they talk about Dexter's run a ball 70 in 1963. This was a run a ball 70 here. And he was in complete control. And he danced down and he hit one over mid-wicket. And it might have gone for 6, I can't remember. He certainly hit a couple. And then he couldn't resist himself. He couldn't resist it. And he came down to the left armour, and it just gripped and turned slightly away from him. And the bat had turned because he was trying to hit him into the onside again. If he'd gone through with the shot over mid-off, then he'd have probably connected with it. But it was overconfidence, and it was that kind of slightly laissez-faire thing that Crawley has, which is on the one hand a strength, because it means that he can just go out there and smash Pat coming through the covers first ball of the Ashes. But on the other, you want him to be greedy. He's good enough now, and he's defensively sound enough. He doesn't have to flirt with a day's cricket. He can dominate it now because his shot making is absolutely top drawer.
Yeah, I thought it was quite interesting that Ravi Shastri, who's the India head coach not that long ago, and when Shastri was the India head coach, Crawley averaged probably about 10 against India. Shastri on commentary is talking about this guy is a world-class player in waiting. And I know it's a relatively small sample size, but across the last 7 test matches, he's actually been one of England's more reliable players. Ben Vishnu asks, with 180 overs remaining in the game and an achievable target, do you think England's obsession with being aggressive and chasing it down in 60 or 70 overs at 5 or 6 runs and over has cost them this match? Lots of wickets thrown away with poor shots. Vishnu is getting at some quotes from James Anderson off the yesterday's day's play that got a lot of traction in India, where Anderson talked about how England were comfortable chasing anything under 600, a message reiterated by McCullum in the dressing room, and also said that they're going to try and chase this down in 60 to 70 overs. Anderson comments have been taken quite literally, I think. I don't think Anderson genuinely thought England were going to go at 6.7 runs per over, as they would needed to get it done in 60 overs. But what do you make of that impression that a lot of people in India at least got of how England played today?
Well, I think the answer's kind of in Vishnu's question, right? What does he call it? An achievable target? It's not an achievable target. No way. Like no team has chased even 300. No touring team has chased even 300 in India. No, never has a side made India or an opposition side made 400 in the four innings. Forget chasing, not even like a match-saving effort. That just doesn't happen. And people are talking about it as if England have somehow given up this golden chance, which is because of what they've done previously. And they're done because of what they've done previously and taken away some of the mystery and sort of the mystique around chasing in test matches because of the way that they play, because of the them being unencumbered. Now, we can get into the specifics of some of England's batters today, and we should do that. But taken in the whole, England made more runs today because of how they play than they would have done in so many previous tours of India when they would have crabbed around and blocked and nudged nurdled
on it, basically.
That had men round the bat, and then there's hooping and hollering and you're feeling like you're under the pressure and you're skilled out for 150. I'd also say that England often talk the talk and people like talking about what England say, and actually if you look at how it matched up on the field, sometimes it's not quite the same. Like sure, Anderson said yesterday they were going to try and chase it in 60 or 70 overs, but they didn't do that. They didn't try and do that. Crawley scored at 55. He was, like, as you said, showed very good judgment, played out Bumrah very sensibly. They were picking, he picked the bowlers at times. It wasn't like there was an instruction to go out and try and do that. Having said that, I guess the one player in particular I think that you'd look at and be a bit disappointed by today is Joe Root, I guess, who makes 16 off 10. He has an LBW overturned in there, and then comes down the track, plays a like skew that goes up, caught at backward point. And we've sort of been here before with Joe Root a little bit under Stokes and McCullum in that it was in the middle of the first Test New Zealand last year. I think he played a reverse scoop to get out, and he was in the middle of a bit of a lean run going back to the India Test the previous summer, I think. And then he made a decent 50 in the second innings, and then came out in between the two tests and said, yeah, I'm kind of still trying to find my place in the side. Maybe I've got a bit caught up in it all. I need to sort of find my role. And then he goes out and makes a brilliant 100 because he's Joe Root, and because he's very good at figuring these things out and adjusting and learning. And that's why he's one of England's greatest ever batters. The tricky thing is that in this situation, it's not exactly as if he's reverting to something that he's done brilliantly before. Exactly. Like, he has a good record in India and he's played some very good innings. But actually, if you go back and look at when he's got hundreds and big hundreds, those have been on flat wickets. Basically, you go back to the Chennai Test, the start of last tour, the Rajkot Test that started the 2016 tour. Those were his 200s in India, and those were on flat pitches. And actually, if you're looking for examples of Root making big scores when there is reasonable, not on Bunsen's at all, but on reasonable assistance for spinners, you've got, I guess, a century against Sri Lanka in 2018, but that's kind of about it. And so when he spoke in the last game about Ollie Pope's innings being, better than anything he'd ever done on a turning track, that was, it was high praise, but it wasn't inaccurate, because Root actually, if you want, you can find a slight gap there. And that means that as he's trying to figure out mentally how he fits into this new approach in these new conditions, he's also trying to figure out technically something that he's never quite mastered in the way that it might seem like he has if you just look at his overall record in India, which is still quite good. So,
Phil, what do you make of it? Root's not got to 40 in his last 10 knocks in India now, going back to the first Chennai Test in 2021. I almost thought it was the way he was playing today was unbecoming of a player that good. Root, he was playing shots that haven't previously brought him huge amounts of success, and he's someone who on paper should have a lot of success against India. The pitch, there was some uneven bounce, but it wasn't like what you'd expect in a fourth innings on day 5 necessarily.
I hear that, and I hear what Ben's saying, but I'd hesitate to think that it's part of a pattern really. A personal view is that he took a view in this particular innings that the pitch, while playing fine, playing okay, playing well for a day 4 pitch anywhere in the world, but especially in India, nonetheless, you needed to do something extraordinary today. Somebody had to do something extraordinary. And with him having had 3 sub-30 scores in a row, and with Bumrah crucially lurking out there, because Root's not quite his bunny, but Bumrah has got the wood on him at the moment. He's removed him 8 times now in Test cricket. He's removed him twice in this series already. And just as Cummins has a slight Indian sign over Root, so does Bumrah. That happens. 2 great cricketers going at one another, and sometimes you hit the bar, and sometimes the bar hits you, and that's how it goes. But Bumrah fancies it against Root, and Root, it might have just crept into his mind slightly. But even if it's subconscious, Root was looking the Bumrah pressure. Root would have been looking at it today and thinking, okay, I'm going to try and take control of this afternoon session. I'm going to try and do something. I'm going to try and roll something out as audacious as anything I've ever done in my great career. And he slapped a 6 down to long off straight away. As you say, that LBW decision, again, he might be looking at that and thinking, well, it's coming. It's coming. You're always under siege in the 4th innings. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, but especially in India. And so why not try and do something extraordinary? Why not back my greatness and see how much it can stretch over the course of this day where as a team we have no more than a puncher's chance. So I didn't mind it. I was frustrated. And the ball was nowhere near there to play the shot. That's perhaps the frustration. It's not necessarily running down and eyeing up straight cow, but when you realise that you're nowhere near the pitch of it and you're playing a cross-bat shot, then perhaps then you might want to adjust. But look, he is human being, and he's perhaps not in absolute prime form, and so why I can understand the thinking of trying to, if you like, hit his way into the perfect rhythm. Many greats have done it in the past. Many Gavaskar used to do it. Gavaskar's a good example. If Gavaskar was out of form for two or three Test matches, obviously he's an opening bat, but if Gavaskar was out of form, he'd go out there and he'd whack it for half an hour, and invariably that would get him back into the rhythm. So I can understand Root with the game sort of poised, 3 down, 140 odd on the board. I can understand the thinking, and he's earned the right to play like that. People will say, well, he's trying to stretch the bounds of his own game, and that perhaps he doesn't quite understand his identity in this new Stokesian, Bazballian era. Personally, I don't really see this instance backing that idea up. Personally, I don't really see it like that. I think there was method in his approach today. There was some logic to his approach today. And we've seen Root as well. Sometimes he does take risks in the first hour or so, because once he's in, then he can just autopilot, and he's so irresistible once he's in. But it doesn't matter how good you are, there are going to be times when things aren't quite in sync, and Root's just going through that at the moment. I think he will have an effect again at some point in the series. I think he will have a moment or two where he dominates for an afternoon, and that could be absolutely critical.
Absolutely. I'm not writing off Joe Root, don't worry.
No, I know you're not, and nor is Ben, and it's totally a legitimate case to be made. But I just didn't see it really today. Anyway, we should move on.
And I suppose we should also talk about Ollie Pope in a similar sort of context, because it wasn't quite as egregious a shot, but he was playing back to a ball that probably wasn't, or trying to cut a ball maybe wasn't quite there for it. And he was also as frenetic as attacking at Root as the start of that innings. And I guess,
but I think there's a big difference there, because Pope, from the way I saw it, was playing exactly how he played in the second innings in Hyderabad. Mm-hmm. Pope was doing something that has previously brought him success, was Root wasn't. Root has never really done what he did in this innings. It's worth reiterating. I get that he's played in similar ways at the start of an innings in the past, but he was only at the crease for 10 balls, hit one of them for 6, hit 2 4s, Was nearly out LBW off another one and was out off the other one.
Yeah.
Root doesn't normally do that.
Yeah.
Whereas Pope actually do have starts like that a lot. And also, it brought him success literally last test match. So I did think that was different.
I guess I'm just trying to think about how England went in general in this test compared to the last test. And in last test, it felt like their judgment of everything was just so good in terms of their attacking options, in terms of which balls to attack, and also in terms of putting stuff out of their mind that happened before. Like Rian Ahmed had been able to go to a ball that had kept quite low. And so it's, that's what happens in India. And teams like that's why teams get bowled out, get skipped a lot of times, because those demons work their way into their heads. So they're not sure whether to attack or to block, and which balls to go out and which balls to not. And that's, I guess, the thing that's slightly frustrating for England is that they've done that so well in the first test, and that was slightly lacking in this test from Root. But I think also fair to say, because Pope's, it was not the best shot, and obviously he's not made what he did in the previous game, I guess.
Yeah. Also, I completely hear what you guys are saying about how unlikely England chasing 400 was given history and all that. But there were definitely points this morning where I thought they had a chance. 132 for 2, 154 for 3, 194 for 4. 200 runs to get with 6 wickets in hand, and it was that wicket of Crawley that really changed the feel of the game. Which, by the way, I did not think was close to being out. When it hit on the pad, I was like, I couldn't believe that India were reviewing it. But then looking at
on that. So my morning was slightly odd. I turned on at 4:00, and I was in bed. It was far too cold to get up and watch it downstairs. So I was watching it in bed, and my headphones packed up. So I was watching it in silence because my wife was asleep next to me. So it's actually quite an interesting way of watching cricket, because you end up watching, you observe it on your own terms. You're not influenced by Ravi and the boys. And when that delivery kept a bit low, I sort of turned away, had a glass of water, and didn't really think twice about it. Saw Rohit review it, because they got 3, so you may as well. But I don't think he believed it either. I don't think any of them really believed it. And so it was a bit of a shock. It was a bit of a shock, because with the naked eye and without any commentary, I dismissed it completely. But then this narrative then takes hold that sometimes when it's inconvenient for you, Hawkeye doesn't work well and is inaccurate, and other times it's foolproof. I don't subscribe to that. I just think it was a trick of the eye, and that ball was landed just about in the tram, straightened up okay. I think you just have to shrug your shoulders to it. But it did not pass the eye test. There's no doubt about that. Do you think there's an issue there with the technology? Do you subscribe to that?
So live, I thought it was not out. When they went for a review, I was very surprised they went for a review. And then when it was a slow motion replays that I couldn't get my head around, because the slow motion replays, to me, just show that it wasn't even clipping, that I thought it pitched outside leg, hit him outside leg, and was missing leg stump. I couldn't believe what I saw when they showed Hawkeye, but I don't think that angle that the replays were using was 100% exactly behind the stumps. So I think it was a bit of an illusion. And when you actually see the still of the DRS Hawkeye moment, you realise how far back he is in his crease, so that if it's correct for where it hit him, I think it was actually always also going to hit the stumps. But the replays that they initially showed probably didn't get that across.
Stokes has said in the post-match presser that he thinks the technology made a mistake. I've watched it over and over, and I think that it's I think that it was fine. Basically, I was as surprised as you both were, and then you watch it because when you see when the technology makes a mistake, you can normally work out what sort of mistake it's made and why. This just looks weird and is a surprise, but is just about okay. I think. Yeah.
Could I just add? Just as Joe's had with the bat. An underperforming 2 test matches. Bairstow's been an interesting pragmatic figure in this series so far, because I don't think he's really passed 30 odd. But he's looked good, I thought, in every innings that he's played, and just seems to get one. Again, Bumrah is after him. Bumrah's got him out twice in this test match. But he's looked pretty sound, and I've liked his approach. Both him and Root have kind of threatened in this series without actually nailing it down. And while, as I said earlier, England lost the game in the first half, nonetheless, Root, Bairstow, Stokes, all right, Stokes was run out, but 40-odd runs between them, 50-odd runs between them in that final analysis. That will sting a little bit because, a fly by the seat of your pants 70-odd from Bairstow at a run of ball, and he was looking capable of that. That really does start to get people twitchy. But again, just as with Root, I feel like there is a score around the corner. I think the same applies with Bairstow. I imagine that already there will be people saying, well, he's got to go, blah, blah, blah. It's got an echo of the Ashes for me. He started slowly, albeit he was coming back from an injury then rather than in this instance, but then came on strong in the second half of the series. And I think his game looks in pretty good order. It's just that Bumrah's always around the corner. And he's one of the all-time great bowlers that I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Bairstow has looked good. I guess the only concern would be that there have been periods in his career where Bairstow has been particularly susceptible to balls coming into him. And I think he looks very good against the spinners, actually. My worry is that every time Bairstow comes to the crease, they're just going to give the ball to Bumrah. Root's got a similar problem at the moment. But there's a wider concern with England in terms of a lot of batters are getting in and not making the most of those starts. So 2 test matches into the series, widely viewed as being 2 very good cricket wickets. There have been 13 occasions where top 7 batters have got out for between 20 and 40. You add to that Duckett getting out for 47, Stokes getting out for 47, Crawley's 2 70s and Stokes 70 in Hyderabad, I guess, was batting with the tail. But a lot of cases of players getting in and getting out, and India are actually very similar. I think they have an identical set of numbers for top 7 batters getting out between 20 and 40. Do you think it's potentially, one, are the pitches not quite as good as people are saying, or is it that both sides are just struggling for a little bit of consistency in their middle orders in particular?
Maybe. I think also England would also look at the number of starts as a positive as well, and actually a positive of their approach. Like, I was struck by this actually in Pope's innings, that Rian Ahmed's got out and you're sort of thinking early-ish wicket, maybe there's a bit of reball, and all of a sudden that stand is almost at 50, and you're like, that's just happening in the blink of an eye. And actually, you are, unless you get one, if you're in this England team, unless you get one in your first 10 balls, you're probably going to make a start, because that's the kind of cricket they're playing.
Yeah.
And actually, again, you can go back through it and see who's got out playing a bad shot, who's got out defending, and what have you. But just, and I haven't done that exactly, but it feels to me actually that the batters who have sort of thrown it away by being caught on the boundary or by playing particularly expansively, it's actually been more on the India side than on the England side. Naturally, they've often got starts because they have attacked well and not, taken time to bed in, and then got a decent ball, I think. And I think that's just reflective of, especially on the India side, of a pretty good bowling attack. But Ashwin possibly not at quite at his best this series, but Bumrah absolutely at his best, and that is kind of just the difference in this game, particularly, I think.
I think they've been wonderful cricket pitches. I think they've been great, and we'd heard rumours that they might be sturdier than they were last time. That's borne out up to now, and I think there needs to be a certain kind of revisionism among some pundits that were too hasty to dismiss what these tracks were going to look like, and too quick to turn cynical. I think these pitches are perfect for Test cricket in that part of the world, and the reason why, you have across these first 2 Test matches, you have a double hundred of such purity that I can't recall seeing an innings as joyous as that on day 1 by Jaiswal. And in Ollie Pope, you have, as was said earlier in the show, perhaps the most complete English knock in the subcontinent in Test match history. There's certainly, that deserves to be discussed on that level. So what you have is pitches with enough spice and life to keep the quicks as well as the spinners involved, but crucially, you can still dominate with the bat if you play out of your boots. And that's what we've had. And that's what you want. You don't want anything too flat, and you don't want anything too spicy, which turns into a bit of a lottery. They've been fabulous cricket pitches. Superb cricket pitches.
On paper, at least, England spinners outbowled India's. So Rahan, Bashir and Hartley this test took 15 wickets for 500 runs, an average of 33.33. Ashwin, Kuldeep and Axar, 9 for 363, an average of 40.33. Rahan, Bashir and Hartley had 3 test matches and 85 first-class wickets between them before this test. I feel that's kind of batshit that they managed to do that, because you compare England's first innings and Indian second innings 2 and 3 in the match. Very similar scores between the two sides, and everyone's talking about Bumrah, one of the all-time greats, having one of the all-time great individual outings. India got pretty much the same score against a bunch of kids, and Jimmy Anderson, with Root, the 4th spinner and England's best spinner for a lot of the first test match, unable to bowl. England actually did really, really well to stick in this game.
Yeah, and a lot of people are eating their own words, right, regarding the makeup of this squad, not least on this particular show. Hartley becomes a more and more intriguing cricketer the more I watch him. And, bowled really well in the second innings, took 4 for 70 odd, but bats well. And he's got ticker, isn't he? He's got the kind of gumption that you need to play in this team. Rayan Ahmed, who wasn't in my team to start the series, you go on the evidence of wrist spinners in the past, in particular in India, and you think perhaps that it's not quite right for them. And obviously he's very inexperienced, blah, blah, blah. Took 6 for and bowled with control. On day one, post-tee, bowled with great control. 19-year-old or whatever he is, leg spinner. So they deserve immense amounts of credit. Even if they get stuffed there in the end 4-1, they deserve credit because they can get turned over in the next 3 test matches, and you can still argue that it's been a positive tour in the round, because, as we said at the start, you're going to be playing a lot of test matches in the next 15 years in India if you're an Englishman. And you need to find a way to compete against their champions. And every single minute that Ahmed, Hartley, etc., Bashir, who's very impressive as well, are on that cricket pitch, they're learning. They're learning how to do it, how to hang in there against the best team in the world. And so I can't throw enough praise at them. I really can't. In the context of the series, Jadeja, you said earlier, might be out. Is that the rumour for the rest of the series?
There was a report in Times of India that Jadeja and Shami would both be ruled out of the series, but that's unofficial as of yet. Yeah.
Okay, because that is the key figure. Virat obviously can come in and strum 300s in a row, right? Sure. But there are other players who are going to score.
That's our first mention of Strum in quite a long time, by the way.
Sorry?
That's our first mention of Strum in quite a long time.
Really? Oh, good. Well, I've been trying to phase it out, but it's like a Tourette's thing. Yeah, if Jadeja is back for the second half of the series, then you feel like he will have a defining role to play. But if he's not, they quite fancy Axar Patel. Axar Patel was unplayable 3 years ago. Well, he went run a ball today, and okay, he took a couple back himself, and he's a fine bowler in those conditions. But England do quite fancy it. They think that they have a way of playing him, and that they can knock him off his lengths and his lines. Ashwin remains, of course, a great, but they have a method now against the turning ball, and it gives them a chance. It's funny. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Really, that the two best bowlers on show across the course of this Test match is a 41-year-old seamer from Burnley, and Bumrah. Is the only two. Well, apart from the support act in the India side, but basically there was 2 seamers, 2.5 seamers across the whole of the game, and those 2 are perhaps the most complete bowlers in it. Again, it's another feather in the curator's cap. This is a great cricket pitch. Gives you something for everybody.
Simon asks, 24 wickets for 863 runs for spin in this Test match, 16 wickets for 215 for pace. Did England make a mistake and misjudge the pitch by not playing Ollie Robinson instead of one of the 3 spinners? I think, a bit of context there is that 2 of the 3 seamers were Anderson and Bumrah, who went okay. But we've been wrestling with this ourselves because you can 100% see how Robinson in particular, I know the commentators bang on about Wood quite a lot, but I think in these conditions, Robinson can replicate quite well, I think, what Anderson produced in this test match. But then you look at it, it's not that obvious how you'd fit another seamer in the side given the relative performances of the three English spinners in this test match, and also the fact that you got Jack Leach likely to be back for the third test match.
Yeah, and you've also got to flip around how you think about bowlers in these conditions a bit as well, because of England, what they have available to them. Like you'd normally be thinking, or England would often be going towards when you're being like, okay, well, we've got some steady spinners who we think can hold down an end, and we've got maybe some quicks who we think can be incisive for using in short, sharp bursts. And actually, if you're looking for the guys to put a pause on the game and to exert some control, that would be, and Leach except that would be Anderson and Robinson in this England lineup. So actually, they almost, if you can get enough overs out of them, and Anderson, looks as fit as ever and got through quite a lot of overs in that first innings, those can almost be your holding bowlers, which can allow you to bring your spinners into the game when you want to, and to take them out if they're getting a bit of a pounding, but bring them back later. And also he's so skillful. I mean, he's not quite Anderson, but he is brilliant and has been brilliant at times, that maybe you could be getting, if like, okay, they're not going to take wickets that frequently, but if you're getting 2 for 50 in 25 overs, you're doing a pretty exceptional job. So there is definitely a case, but I guess it is how you get them in. And if you're looking just purely based on this test match, I guess it would be probably Bashir to miss out and Robinson to come in.
And Leach missing out as well?
Well, that's the thing as well. But I guess that's where the fact that they're controlling bowlers kind of comes into it, I suppose, is that Leach is, you might already look at it and think that actually with that 7 that Hartley got in the first test, that maybe Hartley has just about the edge on Leach in terms of threat in these conditions. And then there's what he offers with the bat. Leach obviously can offer more control, but then you've got Robinson and Anderson who are controlling bowlers in that sense. But they're also invested so much into Leach, and he has got a good record in the subcontinent, that would be a huge call to make. But also they've been brave and unorthodox with their team selections before, so I don't think, and I think they'd be able to spin it in a way to Leach and to whoever else misses out, that this isn't a snub exactly. This is just about us, looking at conditions and the peculiarities of our squad and what we have available to us, and picking it based on that. But that is a way they could go, I guess.
Yeah, Phil, how do you see it? Because I think so much of it is also how much value Rahan and Hartley's runs have had lower down the order. I think it makes this England team a totally different proposition, really. You got someone in Rahan Ahmed at number 8 who's already got a first class 100. He's only 19 years old, and Tom Hartley averaged nearly 40 in the championship last year, and he looks like someone who's capable of scoring test hundreds at 9. That makes the discussion, as if you're going to play two seamers, really difficult when it comes to working out how you fit two seamers in. How do you see it?
I think you're absolutely right about lower order runs. Rayan Ahmed can bat, by the way. That boy is going to score some good runs at this level and in one-day cricket as well. Tom Hartley is more of a hitter at the moment, although clearly has an eye for a ball and has made double hundreds at sort of second team level and threatened a few runs at first class level as well. Certainly he's comfortable enough, and as I said earlier, he fancies it. He's got a great temperament. I think both of those play the next test match. I think they will end up going in with the same makeup. They'll play one seamer and they'll bring Leach back into the side, assuming he's fit. That would be my guess. And yeah, it's difficult to see how they do get 2 in. Really, I think it's just a hard thing to do, because you can't imagine that they are going to drop Jack Leach. As Ben says, they put so much into his story, and he's still pound for pound England's most reliable spinner. It wouldn't be out of character for Stokes to say, all right, Jack, you can sit this one out, and we will bring a Robinson or a Wood back and play 2. It wouldn't be out of character. No one ever knows. No one ever gets England teams correct, by the way. No one ever selects it correctly the day before. From Athers and Nasser downwards, no one ever gets it right. But my instinct is that they'll go in with the same makeup. I think they like it, and look, they will say about this test match, if they're Nick Jaiswal off at any point on day one, then they'd have fancied that they'd have gone and won the game.
But I think that's my point, though. I think that the role that Leach performs in home tests where they value him really highly is just completely different to what's required out here. In home test matches, he bowls a lot of overs, sort of a containing job. He attacks with his field rather than what he delivers out of the hand. Whereas here, in the first innings, I'm not sure. Hartley's not gone well in two first innings so far, but it almost looks, I sort of sense that there's not enough of a difference between the two of them to have both of them in the side in the first innings. And England have at times looked a bit toothless. And I think that, as Anderson's spell at the start of the second innings showed, it makes such a big difference if you can just nick off one or two early wickets, because Jaiswal and Sharma, with these players available, at least the two most dangerous India players. So as kind of crazy as it sounds, potentially leaving out Leach, I do sort of get it, because Hartley's also shown that he can be the main man in the second innings, and Rahane brings so much more than just what he does with the ball. I think it's a very difficult one. I think I agree with you, Phil. I think they will just have Leach in for Bashir for the next test match, but there's still 2 tests to go after that. I don't think it's totally unfeasible to see Leach making way in these specific conditions. I can see him not playing here actually, and ending up back in the side for the first test of the summer, just because of the role he performs. Anyway, here's Mark Butcher's thoughts on the test. But England didn't get the win here in Vizag, but another extremely entertaining test. For them to be competitive with such an inexperienced spin attack, 3 tests between them going into this game against Ashwin, Kuldeep and Axar, is one hell of an achievement. And again, speaks to the sort of weirdness England are able to create, even when, with all rational thinking, when you look at the teams, look at the conditions, they shouldn't really be in with a chance.
No, and it's all attitude, isn't it? Really, that's the main thing. You expect, we've come to expect anyway, that players making debuts and players who are very wet behind the ears under Stokes and McCullum have been able to come in and perform like veterans, like from the very off. And that's the attitude, I suppose. Everybody is made to feel very equal. Everybody is made to focus very much on what their strengths are. I can imagine there's absolutely zero negativity that goes around at all in the camp, and as a result of that, players feel backed. Players feel able to kind of just go and do what they would normally do as if it was a club game, and it's an extraordinary thing. It's a wonderful thing. And the entire approach to the test, I mean, they know they're underdogs and they know they're outgunned, really. If you line the 2 teams up, they know that's a fact. But they go out there and give absolutely no quarter whatsoever, and don't defer to their elders and betters, which is, it's fabulous. Great testament to the leadership.
I quite enjoyed yesterday after day 3, Jimmy came out and said that if we were chasing 600, fine, let's do it at sevens. A lot of people are pouring over those comments like it quite literally. Going back to when Stokes first came in, there's a lot of bravado around this team in what they say publicly. They don't really care what other people think about what they're saying, right? This is all about maintaining that environment so that they can play the way that gives them success.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also, I think, if you think back to somebody like Alex Ferguson and how he would say things in public for his own dressing room, or you do things in order to put the willies up the opposition more than anything else. And it can't, they didn't win the game. They were 100 runs short, but probably got closer than anybody dared to imagine that they would. And all of that kind of it filters into the approach of the team you're playing against, because you kind of think to yourself, well, these guys they're lunatics. And it kind of it makes the opposition's kind of question the strength or the positions of strength that they find themselves in. And that's quite something. And I suppose if you think about it, the whole idea of making not losing test matches not the end of the world kind of allows this carefree approach, and also kind of makes the opposition kind of thinks of themselves that these guys, they're not bothered, that we could beat them in a day and a half, and it doesn't hurt them at all. And I think that's all part of the strength of the ideology, I suppose. And it's probably even better when you have a team that is very, very callow, to sort of give them the idea that it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if we win, lose. We're certainly not going to draw. Let's just go out there and have some fun.
Ben Stokes sort of implied after this game that the conditions haven't been quite what England were expecting. I guess conditions have been, people have broadly said that the two pitches have been very good so far. Spin hasn't been quite as dominant as people predicted before the series. Anderson did a really good job in both innings here. If England wanted to squeeze in another seamer, Ollie Robinson maybe, for the third test match, obviously we don't know what conditions will be like, but how do you think they could go about doing that?
Well, I mean, I kind of imagine that was what they would do anyway, from the very beginning. So, it was a bit of a surprise in both test matches. They've gone in with just the one seamer. And this is also interesting that, and I've been hoping that this might happen for quite some period of time, whereby if you play on surfaces that are so sort of spin dominant, you level the playing field for people who are not as skillful as the spinners you have, like Ashwin and Jadeja, etc. And India have kind of, I'm not going to say got away with it, but India have kind of prospered by preparing pitches that kind of were a little bit on the edge of, on the edge of reason. And some of their batters have really struggled in terms of their own form and their own numbers at home because of that. And it occurred to me that it would only take sort of one sort of chastening loss in a situation where they lost a toss, had to bat last on something that was ragging miles, for them to perhaps go, you know what, we're better players than having to load the dice so heavily in terms of the surfaces that we're playing on in order to get results and win. So this pitch was pretty fair, wasn't it? I mean, didn't do a great deal. Reverse swing came into it, and Bumrah's awesome. And obviously Jimmy Anderson, you give him a tiny bit of assistance, he's only going to go at twos anyway, and suddenly he'll come back into the game as well. So I think it's a good thing, and I would be very surprised now if India sort of rolled the dice on heavy turning tracks, or a heavy turning track in the next test. Maybe if they go 2-1 up, they might go back to it.
Yeah, I've sort of flipped with this. I want to see one of those pitches just to see what happens. Really, I think it'd be quite good fun.
Well, I think you're right, but I think they'd be wise not to do that, given that England's approach is so sort of gung ho, that it puts them at a tiny bit of a disadvantage in conditions which should obviously favour them anyway.
I want to ask about Bumrah, because he was the real difference maker, and it was really, really outstanding, awesome stuff. I wanted to ask, what is it like? What are the challenges posed by elite exponents of reverse swing? Someone who's able to bowl it, around 85 miles per hour upwards, but able to not just get the ball to swing, but to have total control over how much swing and which direction it's going in.
Which direction, yeah. I mean, it's very, very tough. It's particularly tough for right-handers, actually, because clearly that ball coming back into you late and quickly is a real problem. For lefties, it's obviously you have the round the wicket angle and all that type of stuff, but there's more work for the bowler to do in order to get that perfect from around the wicket. But it is very, very tough, particularly when you have a guy who has the skill to hold it up, to make it go the other way as well. He's got such an incredibly sort of good wrist position behind the ball that he's able to manipulate it to make it go out just as much as it goes in. And of course, the speed, as you mentioned, is kind of that's really the key, because the faster you're propelling it down the wicket, the later it goes. The example of his other seam bowling partner throughout the course of the test match was he just didn't quite have the gas on it, so the ball starts to dip earlier, and you get an earlier indication of what's happening. You're always looking for clues. I mean, that's the other thing. As a batter, you're looking for sort of whether you can see the shiny side or not, so you get some sort of a clue as to which way the ball is likely to head before he lets it go. And he hides that pretty well too. So all in all, it's a bit of a nightmare. Yeah,
that sounds it. I mean, just going back to your era. What was it that made the likes of Wasim and Waqar so good at reverse swing? Why is it that some bowlers are so good at it and other great bowlers perhaps aren't quite as good with it?
Yeah, I mean, so Goffey was pretty damn good at it too. And Darren would drop the arm a little bit and bowl with a slightly lower arm to try and get it to go later and later. But generally speaking, it's the speed. You have to be able to get it. You have to be able to let it go at a fast enough rate so that when the ball starts to sort of lose pace as it gets to the end, it does it later than sooner. And obviously, you have to have a good brain for it too. I think that's the thing that's often overlooked. People think, oh well, it's reverse swinging. Then all you have to do is run up and bowl sort of Yorker length or go for Yorker length the whole time, and you'll knock people over. The key to it really is being able to hold a really good length until such a time as you want to employ that ball. Wakar always used to talk about, even though the images I have of him in my head is hitting people on the boot and knocking stumps out of the ground, that if he got it reverse swinging, particularly to batters who were in, he'd kind of drag length back, so it'd be almost like hitting 3/4 of the way up the stumps, and then every once in a while go for the one up there, because the reverse swing when the ball is slightly length and a little bit back of that becomes incredibly difficult, because the movement is late. You've got to negotiate sort of which way it's going to go. So and Bumrah's incredibly smart. He'll set you up for it, and then when the Yorker comes, it's absolutely devastating.
Well, England have really struggled against Bumrah, and I think one of the big tests for them for the rest of the series is, can they respond to Bumrah when he gets in one of those moods? Cheers for your time, Butch. Catch you soon. Without further ado, we've reached the part of the podcast where we have to make a decision of who should be rewarded the Charles Tyrwhitt moment of the test. Our friends at Charles Tyrwhitt are no strangers to helping men make difficult decisions when it comes to their wardrobe. Let's be honest, sometimes we could all do with a bit of direction when it comes to what outfit we need for that smart casual dress code. So check out charlestyrwhitt.com and visit one of their stores, and they'll be able to help you look the part with their wide selection of shirts, trousers, blazers and knitwear. Don't forget to use the code SCORE to get our special Wisden discount of 20% off their full collection. Ben, our moment of the test just has to be that Bumrah Yorker to Pope. What a moment that was.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great balls in the middle of one of the great spells, really. I mean, and I've almost watched it frame by frame to work out kind of exactly what it does, because he's wide-ish on the crease, but he's not using the full width of the crease yet. Because of his unique angle, he delivers it from really wide, actually. And then so the combination of that angle and the reverse swing that is just totally ridiculous, the line it ends up coming down on. And the reverse swing was the defining thing in that spell. And elsewhere, he kind of used it in quite a cultured way. He was sort of setting up Joe Root and Johnny Bairstow, and with, a few out and then one in, or what it might be. Whereas this was just, you could be set on 400 off 800 balls or whatever, and this would get you out, because it was just totally unplayable. And also just absolutely brilliant aesthetic. Like, Pope did the absolute thing that you want all good batters to do when they're beaten by a ball that's that good, which is to create a brilliant sort of silhouette of yourself afterwards, which is getting down to into that exaggerated defense that he's like falling over with his bat still angled down as if he's played the perfect defensive shot, but the stumps are absolutely everywhere. There's the off stump actually wobbles just slightly, and you think, oh, that's so close to actually being all three stumps out of the ground. And also the photographers did their job as well with so many brilliant shots of that moment, especially shout out to Philip Brown, who's one of the greats, who got some really good pictures of it. And also just obviously a huge moment in the game in terms of that spell. Obviously, Bairstow and Root in there as well, but Pope, coming off that score in the first test, and you're feeling like you're going to need something pretty special to get him. That was as special as it gets. And
England were, again, good start in the second innings and would have been pretty happy with keeping India to under 400. Definitely. Phil, Bumrah was rightly player of the match for me. 9 for 91 across 2 innings. Totally irresistible as soon as it started reverse swinging. I guess one thing with Bumrah that I don't think I realised until this tour was, obviously I knew how skillful he is and how much of a freak he is, really. But he's also a great thinker. And in his post-day interview, I think after day 2, you can tell that he knows exactly what he's doing with these skills. It's a great marriage of mind and ability that very, very few players have.
Yeah. beautifully summed up, by the way. He has a sixth sense for when to bowl the slow ball. He turns the shiny side around to get away swing, reverse swinging at times. It did for Root. It did for Bairstow in the first innings. Both of them nicked off to Shubman Gill, who took four catches in the first innings. Yeah, he just has that magical intuition that all the great quicks have, that they can see little details in the makeup of the batter, and then he will adjust what is coming down accordingly. He's been irresistible. He is the key figure in the next 3 Test matches, because England have a way of dealing, or at least suppressing, the slow men up to a point. And Mohammad Shami, as you said earlier, might not be back at all for the series. Bumrah, the orbit of the series revolves around him. He, at the moment, is too good for them. But, you know, England are a funny bunch. They might find a way.
And he's got the best wicket-taking slow ball in Test history.
I was going to ask you about this. So we noticed in the office that on the speed gun, so on day one, Anderson gets clocked at 86 miles per hour and bowled quite a few deliveries around 84 miles per hour. So at this point, we're thinking maybe the speed gun's actually adding a couple of mph to everyone's numbers. Then Bumrah comes on, and sure, there's the odd ball that hits the 140s kilometre per hour. But actually, I think his speed's a fair bit down from his absolute peak. He bowled a lot of balls that are 83, 84 miles per hour. And for me, that just makes it even more impressive what he's doing. There's almost an Anderson-like aspect to where Bumrah is at now, in that he is so skillful for all conditions. His speed is useful, but not essential to what he does. And that slower ball is totally lethal.
You see it time and again.
They know it's coming,
exactly,
and they still can't do anything about it.
But partly it's that it's slow enough. Like it's just 10 k's down. It's not as if it's like a massive change up or whatever you want to call it. It's that subtle bit, and so if you just misread it, it gets you, which is what Folkes did today. I guess he was just a bit early on it and popped it straight back to him. And yeah, because you're kind of tempted to draw a contrast between Anderson and Bumrah by saying, you know, Anderson absolutely maximises the conditions and Bumrah sort of takes him out of the equation. But that's kind of not really fair to either of them, I think. But especially Bumrah is he's a master when it is seaming and swinging, and he knows how to make the most of those. And then also when the pitch isn't offering much tradition to the fast bowlers, he can get reverse swing and then do what he did in that first innings. And even when that's not on offer, he can bowl brilliantly dry, and also he's quick enough that sometimes he'll just slip one in that gets you that way. Like he is as close as it comes to the perfect fast bowler, and yet he's doing it in a way that no other fast bowler in history has. He's a total genius, basically, and like that. This is there's have been lots of great fast bowlers in this era, but you're getting to the point where if you're picking, say, a Test team of the 21st century, maybe he's inching closer and closer to being included in that, I think.
And just to add on that as well, his release point, you know, the jargon of the series, but his release point is mad because of the unique nature of his action. It's coming at you not from the popping crease, it's coming a yard or so in front of the popping crease. And so while through the air, he might be tops of 140 clicks, which is what, 80, 85, 86 tops. And he does have an effort ball, by the way, you know, and like all the great quicks, there are one or two where if he really bends his back, it can come at you quicker. But even so, that's sort of nullified by the fact that he's bowling at you from 17 yards rather than 20 yards, you know, and there so many of the greats in history, they do it their own way, the quicks, and they are harder to pick up than the more conventional classical bowlers. So the Anderson Bumrah comparison reminds me, not quite the same level of pace, obviously, but the Brett Lee Shoaib Akhtar comparison. Now they were equivalent pace, but Akhtar was harder to pick up because it would come from behind him, and he'd have the hyperextension of the arm as well, and so on. And because it was a kind of a chaos of limbs and all sorts going on, that he was harder to pick up than Lee, who had a more classical action. Again, someone like Malinga as well, really hard to pick up because it comes from the umpire's chest. These kinds of things just give Bumrah that extra element of magic, really. And he's broadly unplayable, literally. And you can't say that about any other quick around. You know, Cummins is an all-time champion, of course, but you can negotiate him. You can find a way. But Bumrah, in this form, with the older ball, it's got echoes of the greats. It's got echoes of the Pakistani greats of the 90s. It really does, where there's simply nowhere you can go.
Yeah, and it's not, crucially, it's not just this form of the game as well. Just look at his overall career numbers. So he's 34 tests in, 155 wickets at 20.19. As we mentioned the other day, that's the lowest average of anyone to take 150 test wickets since SF Barnes, who last played 110 years ago now. In ODIs,
he'd be useful on these pitches.
He'd be useful.
Didn't he be?
That was his release point.
He'd be very, very useful.
ODIs 149 wickets at 23. T20Is 74 wickets at 19, economy rate of 6.5. He is the only player in the world who I think is a total guarantee to be picked in a World 11 across all three formats.
And it's very few players actually throughout the T20 era you could say that's true of at any
100%.
time. Yeah.
No, I was thinking about it this morning. I think he's the standout cricketer, full stop, of this era. I think for just how no one can really work out what to do against him in any format now. He's got 10 5-wicket hauls in 34 test matches. I know he's not played a lot of home test matches, but those home test matches are in India, where he's got an even better record than in England, for example. He's a total freak of a cricketer. And I think, a lot has been talked about, Kohli and Sharma are the two superstars of this era, but there are players with comparable records in certain formats to those guys. Well, I really do think Bumrah stands at the very top of fast bowlers in the current era, and I think he really does. I think the only reason we don't talk about it more is because he's only played 34 test matches. He's 30 years old, 34 test matches. If he gets that up to around about 60 test matches, I think it's a very different conversation. Before we finish, Phil, you mentioned Ted Dexter's 70 odd as if we'd all know what it was. I have no idea what you're talking about. Talk us through Ted Dexter's 70.
Ben will be able to tell you. 1963, second test match, Lords, England, West Indies, day 2. Dexter goes out to face Wes Hall and Charlie Griffith on a quick one at Lords, England, 2 for 1 in reply to 300. And he makes 70 in about an hour. And as he said to me, I wasn't going to be any Aunt Sally against those quicks. I was going to go full beam, full bore against them. And he basically stood tall and smashed it against 2 of the great quicks of all time, and made a 70 in about 65 minutes, something like that. This is the famous game that was a draw when Colin Cowdrey walked out with a broken arm to support the number 11. Sobers was playing. Sobers got Dexter out with a swinger coming back in. Dexter maintains it was probably missing leg, but who cares about that? And sometimes an innings that is less than 100 has more majesty than a straightforward 102, 105, 108. And Dexter's 70 is perhaps in English cricket the most famous 50 odd in the game. So there you go. Go and check it out. It's actually on YouTube. It's on YouTube. Yeah. Okay. It's marvelous. He plays one particular shot of Charlie Griffiths on the up through extra cover, where he just throws his hands at it. And you can't believe it's 1963. You can't get your head around it being 1963. It's marvellous.
You talking about the majesty of some sub 100 scores obviously takes my mind back to James Vince's 83 at the Gabba, which I think, as is always the best way to finish the show. Vince's 83 at the Gabba. It's 1-1. Cheers, Phil. Cheers, Ben. We'll be back next week.